Two Ball, Two Bold. Oh, welcome to Two Ball, Two Bold, episode 5. As you can see, we're doing this one split screen. It's a special episode. We'll be talking about the NFL draft that we all just witnessed not too long ago. We'll be going over some of our surprise picks, best steals, biggest reach, that whole deal, everything that everybody likes to go over after draft. I'm Marshon Parker.
And I'm Nathan Tomlin. And we're going to start off today. This episode really talking about mostly just about round one.
Yeah.
The round most people want to talk about. So we'll start with the most surprising pick. Could be good, could be bad. Um, I think we probably both have the same one because I think everybody except for the team that drafted him had it as a surprising pick. But my most surprising pick is Michael Penix Jr. at number 8 to the
Mm-hmm.
Falcons. Um, for obvious reasons, you spend $100 million on a quarterback, then you go draft one. Um, Before kind of go into stuff, did you have someone different, or do you have the same one?
I had somebody different.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
to be, obviously it's most surprising to me because
Mhm.
again, the Falcons seemed like obviously they felt like they were a quarterback away.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins has been now this is the second time he's hit free agency, and he has been the best quarterback in terms of where they're at in their career to hit
Mhm.
free agency, other than Tom Brady and Peyton Manning in the last about 20 years.
Yeah.
And even Tom Brady, really, you didn't know what you were getting. He was 40, right? Um, Obviously, he's not on the level. I'm not saying that, but he was the guy the first time he went in when he signed with the Vikings was in his prime. Now, obviously, he's 36 or 35, I think, but it'll be 36 when the year starts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was interesting because you signed a quarterback to that kind of contract. You have a top pick. You're expecting to be good. You're expecting to win. So your first round picks after this are going to be, you hope, in the 20s. So a lot of people were expecting them to pick defense because defense was their holes. They have good skill players. Drake London's a good receiver.
Mm-hmm.
We made a couple trades, a couple free agent signings for additional receivers. Kyle Pitts, we saw what he did with Matt Ryan his rookie year, putting up 1,000 yards. I see that happening again.
Yeah.
Bijan Robinson is as physically gifted of a running back as there is in the NFL, I think, in terms of just what he does with the ball in his hands. Um, so you would expect them really to go defense, especially with the way the draft have been going with all offensive players off the board. Um, and as I looked into it more and more, it did make a little bit more sense to me. I, it's still surprising. I think they could have probably traded back and still kept him. He was the fourth quarterback off the board. Uh, the team picking behind them was the Jets. You knew they weren't taking a quarterback. Behind them was the Vikings. I'm sorry, the Bears, who had already taken Caleb Williams, then the Jets, then the Vikings, who all the reports were J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah.
And I feel like they could have even tricked the Vikings into trading up, and which the Vikings did, right? They traded up with the Jets to swap one spot.
Mm-hmm.
Just use that. Hey, someone come get JJ. Come get him. Um, so I feel like that's a big reason why it's surprising. But again, as I looked at it, you know, according to the reports, they had him as the number 3 quarterback behind Caleb and Jaden Daniels. So they actually had him ahead of Drake May. Um, and I think they learned their lesson with Matt Ryan, where they never drafted a successor.
Yeah.
And so Matt Ryan eventually, when his time did come for him to play the year on the Colts, but essentially retire, they had no one there. So they didn't want that to happen again with Kirk Cousins. Again, he's going to be 35. He's 35. He's going to be 36. It's essentially a 2-year contract.
Yes.
After 2 years, the dead money is like I think 25 mil for year 3 and only like 12 million which is what their goal is, and they expect to do so. They're not going to pick high, so they're not going to be in a position to draft a quarterback. So the more I think about it, the more I kind of understand it.
Hmm.
But again, I think they could have went about it a different way and moved back and made some moves. But I mean, it's absolutely the most surprising pick. I don't see how there's one that's more surprising because that one was just out of left field to me compared to what all the reports were. I mean, they kept that hush, like nobody knew they were
Yeah.
even looking that way.
Yeah.
Um, and Michael Penix, for most people, was rated as a sixth quarterback. You know, fifth
No,
or
I think a
sixth.
lot of people had him in that fourth range,
No, I think most people had him because of his age. Man, he's going to be 24 next week.
and the injuries when he was in Indiana.
He's had 3 injuries,
Yeah.
uh, season-ending injuries, um, and he's had again. He's 24. Him and Bo Nix are 24.
Yeah.
Um, and so most people had it was Caleb Williams, and it was James Daniels, Drake May, and then J.J. McCarthy, and then Nix and Penix, and these
No,
guys.
you're right. I forgot about McCarthy. Yeah, they probably had him fifth. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's for all those reasons, that was a
Yeah.
shocking pick. But what did you go with?
So I just because listen, the Falcons are going to do stuff. Like, I mean, come on. Like, I am not. I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons drafted a running back in the second round. Like, the Falcons are going to do some crazy stuff. We've been out here long enough to know that they're just going to do some stuff that's going to throw. I had him in another bucket, but to me, I was really surprised that Sean Payton drafted Bo Nix. Will
Mm,
pick what number? What 12? I think it
12.
was.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because not just the fact that I definitely believe they could have had Bo Nix in the second round. I think he's good. You know, I am concerned with all these quarterbacks who are, 24,
Mhm.
25 years old because it just gets to a certain point where you're like, okay, you've been in college so long, at some point you have to believe if you've played, you're in your fifth, sixth year of college, that you're going to definitely pop and be more outstanding than anybody else that's in their second or third year in college. But I mean, when you look at Bo Nix's numbers, it's like Tecmo Bowl numbers. I mean, he dang near completed 78% of his passes. He had, I think, 45 touchdowns, somewhere like 3 to 4 interceptions. Like that's insane. Like I can't even do that on NCAA 14. You
Yeah.
know, but I look at it from the standpoint, I was really surprised they took him with the 12th pick because there's a lot riding on this for Sean Payton. Like
Mm,
if this goes bad, we look at Sean Payton drastically different. And I think it's ironic that it's the Broncos again, and this is no shade against your team.
yeah.
But if you when Russell Wilson was being traded to the Broncos, we all agreed, I think, that he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? And now the experience with Denver went so bad that we're kind of like, I don't know. Now I look at Sean Payton, and the further we get away from Drew Brees, and if this Bo Nix thing doesn't go the
Hmm.
way he expects it to go, we start looking at Sean Payton and we're like, is he a Hall of Fame coach? Or did we
Yeah.
just have a Hall of Fame quarterback for a long time?
Hmm.
So I think that really surprised me where there's like, I don't like to get into that because we're never trying to sound like Skip Bayless or anything like that, legacy. But in reality, like if this pick doesn't go right,
Hmm.
it might change his legacy.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
I
think.
think that's why it was, that's why I kind of again the Falcons are going to do crazy stuff,
Yeah.
and I just look at the whole gamut of what's tied to this pick with Bo Nix.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think it was surprising for the Falcons. So it's yeah, they're gonna do crazy stuff the second or third round pick.
Yeah.
Okay, like if Penix or Nix was there in the second round,
Mhm.
sure, right. Um, the reason Bo Nix isn't surprising to me is A, there were already reports about that.
Yeah. But it was more like second or third round.
And no, not well. I think the fact that all the other five quarterbacks had the difference between the top six and everyone else
Yeah, drastic difference.
was an ocean. I mean, the next
Yeah,
quarterback wasn't picked till the fifth round, Spencer Rattler.
correct. Yeah,
So I think that did have something to do with it. But to me, I have it. I actually look at it different. I think Sean Payton, when he got there, he didn't want Russell Wilson,
no, I understand that. Yeah,
and you could tell that from the beginning, the way he publicly, as a coach, even after being an analyst, but as a coach, he
yeah,
was like, he's not having his own office, all this stuff. I mean, I agree with that, but it really should have been done in house.
yeah.
So they handled that Russell Wilson situation terribly. Like, I'm a Bronco fan. I wasn't happy about that trade in the first place. Not every quarterback is good at 35 years old. Okay,
Yeah,
we were spoiled with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning for a couple of years, and some other guys. Most quarterbacks are not good,
no.
and the way Russell Wilson plays, you would expect his drop off more than a Tom Brady or than a Peyton Manning, right?
And he's not a big guy.
Correct, but he plays by broken down plays and moving around and
Off script.
kind of chaos, right?
Yeah,
So for me, I think this pick, I don't think it's really going to do much for Sean Payton's legacy overall. But if it doesn't pan out, I mean, he's out of Denver pretty quickly, and
well, I don't know. I
and
think some of the questions have already been asked, though. Like, I
well,
think,
but I
you
think
know,
that's already for almost any coach, you could say that, right? That has a
yeah,
quarterback that they have for a long time. It is hard to It's always hard to separate, right? We had that question about Belichick versus Brady forever, and then
which is insane, though. Which is insane.
Brady leaves and then wins the championship, and
Yeah,
Belichick goes under 500, which there's more to it than that. Let's be real.
yeah.
But
It's nuanced.
um, yeah, it just to me the Penix pick was more surprising because that one no one thought like everyone knew the Broncos were looking at quarterbacks. I mean,
Yeah,
when you're
yeah,
sitting there and your quarterback room is Zach Wilson on a flyer, which I like that
yeah.
trade to be honest. Like if it worked,
They just did it. Well, like a couple of days before the
yeah.
draft, right?
Well,
Yeah,
they're only paying half his salary. If it
nice.
they decline his 5th year option, so they're paying 2.5 million for the guy.
Yeah,
If it pans out, great. You sign to a 1 year prove it deal, do it again.
yeah,
If it doesn't, you're a top 5 draft pick and you get a quarterback, right? Um, so the quarterback room was Zach Wilson, Jared Stidham,
yeah,
who's a career backup,
yeah,
and Ben DiNucci, who was in the XFL.
yeah.
So Bo Nix is probably going to play, and we'll get to that later when we're going to talk about some other things. But to me, the Penix pick was just more shocking because that wasn't when you pick in the top 10. Yes, sometimes I understand going for the best player,
Hmm.
but you got to pick a certain extent to need because you can only play one quarterback, right? So it's not like,
Correct.
oh, well, the best player on the board is an edge rusher. We already have one. Okay, well, you can use another because they rotate. You don't
Yeah.
rotate quarterbacks. So that was
No,
just
no,
my
no,
thing,
no.
but I see what you're saying about the Knicks.
Now, what?
So,
So, okay, the biggest steal,
mhm,
and this could be a conversation that's had later, but I believe that in this draft, and this is best still of the first round, right?
first
I believe there's two guys in this draft that if I were a betting man, I would say has potential, like gold jacket potential.
round.
Uh, Marvin Harrison is one, but he was the fourth pick. That's not really a steal.
Yeah,
Um, I can't believe that the Raiders ended up with Brock Bowers. I I I I can't believe that they ended up with him.
I
And
can't root
and
for my boy now, man.
and the thing about it
Root
is,
for him.
it's like it's so funny because I'm just thinking in my head, don't mess him up. Like, don't, find a good quarterback. I find myself now because I mean, Brock Bowers, him and Marvin Harrison Jr., I think by far were the best two players in college football the last two seasons.
Mhm.
So it's and for you to say Brock Bowers was the best player in the SEC last year, Like that's crazy, you know. He could do so many things. He's about, I think, 6'3", 6'4", somewhere in that range, about 240.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know what his 40 time is, but he gets vertical. I mean, he's athletic. He's got wiggle, you know, and he's any.
Deceptively athletic too.
Look, we
He
don't
does
have to
not
say
look.
that for every guy who looks like him, all right?
No, no, no. I'm just saying, like, even if you
Okay.
look at him in street clothes, like, he
Oh yeah,
doesn't
yeah, yeah.
look like an imposing physical presence.
No, he doesn't. No.
His haircut looks like a guy that would be at the golf club, dude,
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
country club.
Well, they'll get him fresh in Las Vegas. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. But it's he's so good, and I get it. He's a tight end, you know, and but
Uh,
nowadays the way they, but well, I know then that's the point I was going to make is nowadays a tight end is just, you know, by positional use the tight end, but really he's a weapon. You know, like it's just like Travis Kelsey. Technically, he's a tight end, but in actuality, what he is a huge slot receiver
mhm,
that they position all over the field and use like a chess piece, right?
mhm,
So my hope is that that's exactly how the Raiders use him because he's so good, and if so, then you know he is the type of guy who can have a, you know, 10, 12, 14 year career and make, you know, 8 Pro Bowls. So the fact that they got him with the 12th pick, I'm sorry, the 14th, was the 14th
thir-
pick,
thir-
right?
13,
Was it
13.
13th pick? The 13th pick, the fact they got him with the 13th pick, who I believe, again, was the second best player in college football and the best player in SEC and the best just overall just football player in this draft.
Mhm.
To me, that's the biggest steal. Now, what about you?
Yeah. So he, there's four guys I want to talk about in terms of steals.
Mm,
Um, and it is interesting because the first, I'm just double checking my stats here. 14 players were offensive players.
yes, there was a
And
run. There was a run.
Brock Bowers was he's the only person in college football history to win the John Mackey Award twice for
Hmm.
best tight end. Just his presence. Watch games. Watch Georgia games when he played, when he didn't.
Yeah,
Even when he didn't touch the ball, like he just opened everything for their offense because you had to worry about him. And once he had the ball in his hands, he was unreal. But he was one of them that I had on there. Because if I look at the top three picks for quarterbacks, okay, Marvin Harrison's a wide receiver, all right, and again, get into him later, I'm sure.
yeah,
The Chargers needed a tackle, so
yeah.
I'm glad they made the right choice there. And now they
Oh
have
yeah.
bookend tackles to protect Justin Herbert for the next 12 years, which as a Bronco fan, I'm sitting here like, dude, every team in our division, except the Raiders still don't have a quarterback, but the Chargers are loaded now. Now, if they can protect Herbert, they have a better coach, in my opinion, and then the Chiefs
Much better.
have Mahomes. So we're just I might as well not even pay attention to the NFL for the next decade. Um, the Giants, they went Malik Neighbors over Bowers. Okay, I mean they're paying Waller, the highest paid tight end in the NFL, I think right now, or second highest paid
Well, he
tight end.
actually he's probably the Giants are believing he might retire.
That would probably be beneficial for them, to be honest, because he's a big hit on. Well, he's still kind of gets their salary cap, but
Injury
uh,
prone.
the Titans panicked and took a right tackle
Yeah.
as a seventh pick when they have a right-handed quarterback. They could have taken Bowers. The Falcons really didn't have that need. Um,
No.
the I mean the Bears could have even, to be honest,
I
with
thought he was
with
going to be a Jet. I thought he was going to be a
with
Jet.
DJ Moore and Keenan Allen already, and then you put Cole Kmet and then Brock Bowers, because it's your point, Brock Bowers can split out and play the slot.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
they went to Doomsday. Okay, then the Vikings needed a
He's really
quarterback.
good.
The Jets went with the tackle. That was the
Yeah.
which I don't blame them. I think they weren't expecting Fashanu to be there
No, they weren't. I
because
don't think
they
so
do
either.
have two aging tackles. Both their tackles are 33, and both
Hmm.
have had a history of injuries.
Yes.
One's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, Smith,
I agree.
right?
Yeah.
if he wasn't didn't have the injuries the last few years, he'd be a first ballot because he was the best, one of the best 2 or 3 tackles for his whole career when he was healthy. But anyway, the Jets went that route, and that left Bowers at 13. And I think the Raiders, they had so many needs. They were like the Broncos, in my opinion. There's so many needs, but they also need a quarterback.
Mhm.
Well, once Nix wasn't there, there's no quarterback to take. So what do? Well, we need everything, so we take the best player.
Best player available. Yeah.
Fell to them. But again, because there were so many offensive players up front, first 14 guys, I did want to talk about a couple defensive players too. I think Dallas Turner at 17 to the Vikings is a steal. I think he's the best edge rusher in the draft. Um, the Vikings gave up picks next year to move into the first round earlier before draft day, and then traded 2 more picks next year to move up from 23 to 17 to get Dallas Turner. So
Yeah.
essentially, Dallas Turner cost them their second, third, fourth, and fifth round picks next year. And for a team with a rookie quarterback,
Yeah.
probably not a great idea because now you can't build around him.
You need those picks. Yeah.
But in terms of just the pick itself, I think it's a steal. And then we're going to talk about this team a couple times. But the Eagles getting the top corner in the draft at 22, right? We've talked
Yeah.
about this before. The 2
Yeah.
defensive positions that are premium positions, right, are edge rusher and corner.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 most important defensive positions in the NFL. And you get the top corner at the 22nd pick. I don't even think they had to trade.
No, they didn't.
Check, but I don't think they even traded up because they lost in the first round of the playoffs. To not even have to trade up and get him was a steal. And then you could also say Detroit because Terry Arnold was the other top corner, and they got him at 24. Although they did trade with Dallas to move up to get him,
Yeah.
but depending on which corner, I guess you had higher on your list would have been the bigger steal. But those
Well,
were
you
the
know who
corner
my guy is. My guy went the second round,
No.
but
We're gonna go
yeah.
and get into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I had Bowers overall as the best steal too because
Yeah.
if it was a different year without so many quarterback needy teams and so many good quality quarterbacks, to be honest. Again, don't think they were all necessarily top 12 picks, but there were 6 quarterbacks that were probably second round grades, first or second round grades, right? I think we could agree on that. Nix and Penix, I think, should have been off the board by the end of the second round. Most years, there's not that many quarterbacks, and most years,
Well,
there aren't that many teams that need a quarterback.
I think
And I
2 of
think
the guys were first rounders, and the rest were drafted in the first round
I would
because
say 3. I'd say the top 3 were all first round picks, not the top 3 picks necessarily. But I think Drake May's only 21, dude. He turns 20.
no, I like Drake May. I like Drake May, and I like Caleb Williams.
So you're talking about
I don't know about the other guys.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
When we talk about some other stuff, but anyway, I feel like if it's next year, right? There's not the quarterback class that there is this year. If Brock Bowers goes back to Georgia, which I wish he would have, if he would have went back to Georgia, played another year, comes out next year, I think he's a top 5 pick.
Yes, I agree.
You know what I mean? Because there's not going to be that many teams. Because all the teams that picked quarterback this year, and again, what we're going to talk about this, half of them are probably going to be in the top 10 again.
Yep.
Right, and they're not going to take a quarterback. They just took one. So, yeah. So then that's they're the best deal. We pretty much agreed on that one. So biggest reach of round 1, and so I kind of know where you're going because you kind of alluded to it when we talked about surprising picks. But there were 3 that I think were big reaches. Michael Penix, who again I really do feel like Atlanta could have traded back, gotten additional picks, and even if they wanted to get him in the first round to get that that 5th year option, I still think they could have traded back. still drafted him and gotten an extra third rounder, second rounder, fourth and a third round or something. You know,
Mhm.
Bo Nix to Denver. Now, I don't think he would have lasted till their second round pick. Well, they didn't have one, first of all. So he definitely wouldn't have been their next draft pick. But I don't think he would have lasted to the second round. I think someone like the Raiders would have traded up with a second round pick to potentially snag him in the second round. Um, you may have had some teams that have older quarterbacks that may have taken a flyer on him in the second round before the Broncos got a chance to pick again. I do think they could have traded back to later in the
Mhm.
first round, and that would have been my preference. My preference was to do that all along because they have so many holes. But my preference was to trade back, acquire more picks,
Mhm.
take the best defensive player available at the time whenever you draft, whatever position they happen to be, because we need everything, and tank this year. Let Zach Wilson play. Does he work? Does he not? And if he doesn't pan out, we get a top 5 pick. We didn't. All we did was move back 30 slots in the 200s this year. It's all it cost us to have Zach Wilson to see what he's got, and we're a top 5 pick next year, and then we can get a quarterback at that point. And then we would have better pieces around the quarterback, offensive, defensively. Right? We lost our starting center. Um, so I had both of them, and I mentioned it earlier. J.C. Latham at 7 to Tennessee, a right tackle, a big dude. He's a good player. Most people had him going around 20,
Mhm.
and I think the Titans panicked. I do think they took the wrong tackle. I think they should have taken the kid from Penn State, personally. So I think they reached on that. If he was the tackle they wanted, I think they could have traded back, knowing again the Falcons weren't going to take an offensive tackle because their line's not bad. The Bears weren't going to take a tackle because they did last year. Um, uh, you knew the Vikings were going for a quarterback, and so the Jets. So you did have the Jets, but you could have traded back a couple slots because everyone thought the Jets were really going to take Bowers. So I had any one of those three. You could take your pick, but I do think Penix and Nix were second round quarterbacks at best that went in the top 12 versus Latham was at least still a first round pick.
Mhm.
But the
Mhm.
positional value, right, of a quarterback, because to your point, if you think you got the guy, you got to take him. And if Sean Payton was that convinced that Bo Nix is his guy, then if it pans out, we're not sitting here, in 3 years, we're sitting here and be like, yeah, we're stupid. Sean Payton was right, everyone else was wrong. And if that's the case, that's the case. So
It's so
positional value
tough
does
though.
does lean towards a quarterback over a right tackle when you have a right-handed quarterback. But I do think the quarterbacks are bigger reaches.
Well, because when you look at it, you look at this. So history has showed us. Like my biggest pet peeve since I was a kid is when you watch the draft and they say they've got their quarterback for the next 15 years or 10 years. And I'm like, we know that like there's a 60% chance that that's not true.
More than that. I'd say more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being generous when I say that, right? So most of these guys aren't going to pan out. And when they don't pan out, it sets the franchise back. So like the Titans, yeah, it was a bit of a panic move, but if you can find even a starting level, not Pro Bowl level, but like a starting level, like we don't have to worry about our left tackle or right tackle for the next 7 to 8 years.
Mhm.
There's so much value in that because right tackles or left tackles, starting quality ones, they don't hit the market. And if they do, you have to overpay them. So if you can draft them and you can control their contract for the first, 5 years,
5 years.
there's such a value in that. But the quarterback position, to me, I just really believe unless you really truly believe that this guy is special,
Mhm.
you don't because especially now because it's like, listen, I love Purdy. but I'm really like, man, they're going to have to pay him $50 million in a couple of years. Like the
Yeah,
quarterback position,
next
if
year, after next year.
I mean, listen, so it's like if a guy is good, if you draft him, if he's good, not great, if he's good, then you're going to feel pressure. Okay, another the perfect example because I think Purdy's going to take another step up. So I don't know if he's but Tua, like I don't know that Tua is going to be any better ever than he is right now. But yet
Mhm.
he's going to be paid like he's a superstar,
But
right?
he
So
also
with
has a system that is,
tailor made for him.
well, in the receivers
Yeah,
too.
they just signed Odell Beckham today, which
I
I don't
know.
know if that really helps much, but whatever.
Well,
Uh,
it does. If you think, I think he's a better third receiver than what they had.
I mean, but will he still in the field? I mean, like
Yeah,
Odell Beckham was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, but now it's like I don't even know if he can stay on the field. But going back to the draft real quick, my biggest reach is Penix just because of the fact that because you have to take into consideration now you can't just look at the talent, you can't just look at what it's going to look like on the field. You have to play the money game with everything now, right? So when you look at Penix, the Falcons, I'm assuming they're looking at this as though, hey, we're going to go the Green Bay route, right? But what happened with Green Bay is, Jordan Love was like 2021 when they drafted him.
mm,
And he took a bit of a team friendly contract when he did his extension. So it
well,
worked
yeah,
well.
he
And,
did an
and Jordan
extension.
Love is a stud. He's a stud now. So it's like it
Well,
worked.
he took the extension to guarantee his financial security before he could do
Correct. But
anything.
but but
Yeah,
but from what we know about how his play now, he's
right.
underpaid, right?
Well,
S-
that's
So
the
so
chance
it's
he
that
took, right?
No, no, and I'm not. I don't blame him for that. I'm just saying, like,
Right.
at the franchise won from that, right? So
Absolutely.
from that transaction, where if you look at Penix, Penix is going to be at a point where he's not taking a team friendly. He's going to be like, I'm at that point. He's going to be at an age where he's going to be pressed to try to get as much money as he can, or even if he's not, it just doesn't. It's not panning out well because there's two reasons you want a young quarterback. You want a young quarterback because you want to get that position solidified, and you want to be able to have him locked in for the next 5 years or whatever, right?
And
The other
you want
thing
him
is
cheap. You
you
can
want
build
him
around him so
cheap
he's cheap.
so you can
Mhm.
build around him, right? So you have a guy that by the time he plays, he's not gonna be a fossil, but he'll be older than your typical young quarterback would be.
He'll be 26 or 27 depending on when they play him. But
Yeah,
to your point with that though, is it actually might be cheaper to go this route, right? Like I mentioned before, the cost of moving up to get a guy
yeah,
costs so much capital, draft capital, right?
yeah.
And if you look at it this way, so he's under contract, the 4 year contract, I looked it up. So they get a big signing bonus, rookies. Over the 4 years, he gets 4 years, take out the signing bonus that he gets,
Hmm.
23 million total.
Hmm.
It's very limited on the salary cap. So what that does is, again, we talked about Cousins only really having 2 years, and they could move
Yeah,
on. If Cousins is not it, or if they feel like, dude, Michael Penix is balling in practice, and we got to
yeah,
give him a shot.
yeah,
Or Cousins is older, get injured. You know, so many things that happen. He's still going to be making just a little bit when Kyle Pitts is going to be on the extension, and football contracts are
Drake
upfront,
Drake London,
right? Drake
Bijan, yeah,
London, Bijan won't be there yet, but running backs rarely ever get a big second contract, and when they do,
yeah,
that's the only one they get.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they'll all be having front-loaded contracts when Penix is making 5-6 mil.
yeah,
So if they move on from Cousins and Penix is the guy, they'll have a guy that they feel can win now and not drafting a rookie who's a rookie quarterback with these guys. He's a guy that has sat behind an old veteran, probably had some playing time because Cousins probably missed a game or two. I mean, it's going to happen.
it'll happen
You know what
at
I
at
mean?
his
But
at his age and with the injuries he's
yeah.
had.
So and there's 17 games now. Dude, Goodell's talking about getting rid of preseason and having 20 games
Add another, but I'll say
or
this: I
18
think
games or whatever.
draft capital is incredibly overrated, and the
I
reason
don't
it's
know, man.
overrated. Let me
It's
tell you why,
not.
though. Let me tell you why. Because most of these guys aren't good drafters. Like, no, no, that's the truth. It's like if you
Yeah, but
have,
they think
if
they are.
but most of them know they're not. Like most of them know they're not. That's why it's like, hey, that's why it's like they better hit on their first round pick or their
Yeah,
first and second round pick because most of these GMs they're not good at drafting, and most of these organizations aren't good. Like if you look at it, you can tell the organizations
but they're
because the
about 5 years.
organizations that are doing the best are the ones who are good at
Always
drafting
do. Always are.
because like okay look let's I'm gonna be a homer but look at the Niners, okay, the core of the guys were draft picks. Fred Warner was a fifth round pick, Kittle was a third round pick, Debo was a second or third round pick, Ayuk
But
was a late first round pick, obviously we know Purdy was a seventh round pick, um,
come on, they didn't
it's
end
like
of the
but
year.
and then even on the defense you have like Greenlaw I believe was a fourth or fifth round pick. The safeties were in the fifth, sixth round. Like they drafted starters and Pro Bowlers
Mhm.
later in the mid rounds to later rounds. The Eagles draft well all the time.
Still
Uh,
do.
the, the the Chiefs
Ravens,
draft well. The Chiefs draft very well.
Ravens draft
Uh,
well too.
Ravens draft well. Steelers traditionally draft well, and it's not this just them popping on their first round pick. They hit in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth rounders where they're getting starters, high quality starters, or even sometimes Pro Bowlers. And then
Well,
you look
it's
at other teams that don't do well; they don't draft well. So it's like if you don't draft well, you're probably going to you can potentially hit on your first round pick, maybe your second. The other guys you're not going to hit on. So draft capital in a lot of cases for some teams is extremely overrated.
well. So where I disagree with you on this is a lot of the guys you pointed at, right? Safeties getting fourth, fifth round. You know when the first safety was drafted this year? The first one,
I
like
believe the
fifth,
what?
like the 50th pick.
Yeah,
Safeties, unless they are generational, typically don't go first round. Tight
correct.
ends, unless they're freakish guys like Vernon Davis, Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers, don't usually go first round. There's so interior offensive linemen rarely go. Maybe one or two go first round, right? So that's where the pressure to when you do draft those guys in that first round, you
Mhm.
better hit those. You have to because they don't go the positional value of that is that right. Like you can draft a starting caliber interior offensive lineman in the third, fourth, fifth round. You can draft a starting caliber safety in the fifth round. Now, when you hit quarterbacks, corners, left tackles, when you hit those late, that's great drafting. And sometimes you get lucky. Like, come on, ain't nobody thought
Well, and
Brock.
that's the thing.
No one thought
Most of
Brock.
these
The
guys, left
49ers didn't think
tackles,
Brock
left
Purdy
tackles
was
will be
going to
first
be.
round picks.
That's what I'm saying. But that's my point.
Of
So,
course, now. Yeah,
but the draft capital is
Fred
important
Warner
because
was going to be
even
the best middle linebacker in the league.
but middle linebackers don't go first round.
No, but my
Like,
point is, do you think when they drafted him in the fourth round, they said he's going to be the best middle linebacker in the league in a couple of
well,
years?
no, of
No.
course not. Of course not.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that either.
No, but I'm saying that's what I'm saying is
Because
teams.
they still passed on
So
him 3 times before they picked him. So it's
of
not like,
course,
oh,
of course,
we
of
knew all
course.
along.
No, 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 no,
But
no. But they knew he fit the system.
right, exactly. So,
Yeah.
but that's my point. Is the teams that fit the system, they draft players that fit what they want to do. They don't just draft, oh, this guy has stats or this guy has
Yeah.
freakish numbers, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, we're pretty much on agreement with that. The biggest reach, Michael Penix, because
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, again, I get what they were doing,
Yeah.
just like I get what the Broncos were doing with Knicks. I just feel like they could have went about it in a different way. And where draft capital is important is when you have a rookie quarterback. Eventually, like, look, Joe Burrow's making 60 million a year now, right? This
Yeah.
$60 million cap hit. Look, they're not. They franchise T. Higgins. He ain't getting an extension because they got to extend
Yeah.
Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to draft to get guys cheap to replace, and they're not going to
Yes.
be. They may not be as good, but they have to supplement it to some extent. On defense, you don't just play 11 guys. You rotate every guy except for maybe your middle linebacker and your two corners, your
Correct.
secondary, right? Your front seven, other than your middle linebacker, typically rotate, right? Your back four, they're pretty much out there unless they're hurt. Offense, the offensive line, the quarterback. are there. The other guys rotate. All the receivers, the tight ends, the running backs. You need to be 2, 3 deep at each one of those positions at least, or you're not going anywhere. So it is important to have those picks because you can get depth. Now, yes, the better teams, the better front
Mhm.
offices do find those diamonds in the rough. They do draft high value and get guys that are able to that are Pro Bowl caliber players in the mid to late rounds. But if you can get starting caliber player or key rotational pieces in the third, fourth, fifth round, that's still a win. If you get guys that stick and play, and they're not just special teamers, and they contribute to your team, that's still a win. And you still need those pieces on your team. So if you trade all that, we talked about the Vikings next year, they're going to have a first, a sixth, and a seventh round pick, unless they get other picks. How are you going to build around a quarterback?
I actually like the Vikings. Now, I'm
No, I
telling you
do
right
too,
now,
but they're but
he's my early rookie of the year.
oh man, get out of here. I don't think he's even going to play right away. Got to keep him upright. I think they're going to let Sam Darnold take those lumps and make sure they can block first.
Maybe for the first couple games, but I like the Vikings. I like their roster. They did let go of some people, and I understand what you're saying as far as the importance. Obviously late, but again, it's just like when they say, "Oh, this team has 11 picks." Well, if
Hmm,
they're terrible at drafting, it doesn't matter.
right.
But if they're trading up, because you got to figure when they lose draft capital, that means they've traded two, three, they traded a present pick and some future picks for someone who is a higher rated prospect. So then that means if they're a higher rated prospect, maybe you have a better chance of hitting on that as
Right.
opposed to having all these picks. Because let's be honest, the only reason the Bengals aren't a better franchise than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago. They just happen to get
Or
Joe Burrow, who is a generational talent, and then they happen to get another generational talent the next year in Jamar Chase. Like
right.
that's it. That's it. So that they are a prime example of, hey, if you get a few blue chippers, your fortunes could change because
Well,
they're still the same sorry organization.
well, you get a quarterback, and that solves a lot of your problems.
And you get it. Listen. This wasn't true maybe 15, 20 years ago, but you get a blue chip or stud receiver, which
Mhm.
makes me very nervous about the Cardinals because I honestly believe Marvin
Well,
Harrison. I think 3 years from now he's going to be the best receiver in the
if Kyler can stay healthy, man, 'cause they ain't got no depth at quarterback.
league. Yeah, I mean it's going to be hard for a guy my height to be able to play 17 games a year.
Dude, well, they put their chips in that bucket, man.
Hey, hey,
But yeah, I think that finishes the round one talk. Um,
yeah.
we'll be back with another episode of some more draft day discussion. But we appreciate y'all joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Take care.